Welcome to the Beyond Membership Podcast, where we are uncovering what drives associations forward and how the suite of Momentive software products accelerates that momentum. It's been a minute since we recorded one of these, Rob, but here we are. And what have you been up to since the last one?
Well, I was back in DC again. It seems like I'm there a couple times a month, although this time was quite interesting because we have a client by the name of the Military Women's Memorial, which is at Arlington National Cemetery. And so I was welcomed there by our client. They walked me around the memorial, which was an emotional experience with all the incredible things that these women have done on our behalf, but also to see our software in action. They actually use it, obviously, to track all the folks that are involved in all the retired military. They have it on these big screens where it shows profiles of these people and all the incredible things they've done. And so there were 3 women who walked me around the museum, and so it was quite, we work really hard on our software, and one of the things that makes it really exciting and rewarding for us is that when we hear our clients doing great things with our software, and this one basically was with the cherry on top. It was just simply one of the best experiences I've had as it relates to seeing our software in action. So really honored that I was welcomed there. So pretty exciting week. What about you?
Just continuing to build the software, but that's really, that's always really exciting to hear on my side, because I don't necessarily get to connect with those stories as much, and it's really cool to see your work make an impact for a group.
Well, I'm going to probably want to try and invite them for a future podcast, because I think that they would have a really fun story to tell. So I'll work on that.
That sounds great. So we're really pleased to be joined today by Chris Hunter, who's with the AAPA, the Physicians Assistants Association, and a longtime contributor and someone who has used and worked on the Momentive AMS Aptify. So it's great to have you with us, Chris. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, and then, as usual, we need to hear something interesting about yourself.
Hey, all. I'm Christopher Hunter. I've been working with the AMS Aptify platform since 2007, so I believe that's about 18 years. Now been heavily involved in the community, not just the conferences, but I've actually been on every single committee, developer roundtables. I've presented with them. My background's a web developer by trade, and so diving in and learning pretty much my entire professional career on Aptify. So tons of fun there. Interesting. I don't know if everyone here is going to find it interesting, but I'm a Japanese animation junkie. I watch more anime than probably a human should, which is worse that I have quantitative data kind of to back that up. And a longtime personal anime project that I started back in 2005 and has evolved with me over the course of my development career, and that kept me sort of up to date with tech.
So I think it's fun when, just kind of switching topics just slightly, with the 3 of us on here, your long background with Aptify, Jake's long background with Nimble, and of course my long background with Netform, that I imagine, around 2008, 9, 10, that range, we were probably all thinking that, or 2012, 15, we were all probably thinking the other solution was stronger than the other one. So I think it's kind of cool that we're all here to represent.
Yeah, it is very cool. It was the Aptify. I walked right out of college into Aptify. That being said, they prepare you for some stuff. They don't prepare you for a brand new spanking development language. And it's our website needs to be redone in 2-3 months because we're pulling the plug on the other ones. I've done the tutorial in class.
Yeah.
So it was what a
fire,
jump
right?
into a world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all share that similar sort of development background. I think for me, it's been basically my entire career has been with associations on the vendor side, but still very much learning about their business processes and how they actually deliver the value to their members. And it's put a slight angle on my perspective on business, but also it's been a really good one. And I like how you can kind of connect to a value, right? You can kind of see these associations like making a difference for the world, and you can kind of take away that you're a part of that, and that's really rewarding, I find.
Yeah, and like I echo that. It's like because I went right out of college into an association, and as everyone says, you never search for an association, you fall into an association job, and then you never leave. And there's a reason behind that is like they eat, live, breathe their mission and vision, and like that's the whole point of associations. I've worked with numerous associations. This is my fourth Aptify client. I also did consulting for 5 years with Perbite Inc. So I've worked with about 40 Aptify clients in total. And the one absolute consistency of them all is that vision mission is the actual driving statement. It's not revenue, it's not sales. It is that mission of impacting whatever that profession or community or group would be. And I think that's why people never leave it. You latch on to that, and it's a ton of fun. I'm never leaving the association world. I know that.
Well, and it definitely is very rewarding. I've worked at 2 associations and saw the same thing, but of course we see it, a bit from the one level removed. But it's certainly, as a software provider, when we hear about someone like the American Academy of Pediatrics doing great things for pediatric doctors who are obviously taking care of the nation's children. I mean, it's wonderful to be able to get in behind a mission like that, just like the mission of the Women's Military Museum that I was just talking about a few minutes ago. So I can see why I too fell in to an association. I had an early job in the federal government, but I started learning how to be a good developer, and an association was willing to hire me. And essentially at that point I was hooked for my career. I've been in and around it ever since. And I think, Jake, you probably have somewhat similar story, just getting into the
Yeah, I haven't worked for an association yet, but I definitely kind of fell into providing software to associations,
supporting them all the way. Yep.
Right, and along with that comes, right, not only just building a product that they use, but also being there for them in the moments when they need to use it in a particular way, or giving them advice, helping them customize it to their needs. And I think that's definitely the one driving thing that connects all three of us here. And I find the connection to that mission is really, like you were saying, it really keeps you around. But generally, it's the thing that is more than revenue. I think you were saying this, Chris, towards the beginning. It's like it takes you a little bit beyond that, like, well, let's just make the most money we can, to let's make an impact for people.
Yeah, revenue enhances what we can do and all that, but it is not our top 1, 2, 3 goals. Like that's not the purpose of the business, not the purpose why we're here. And that being said, there are for-profit mentalities and stuff that I think some associations that aren't truly modernized should kind of bring some of those productization and sales sort of methodologies into it to help increase revenue and all that. But at the end of the day, you're increasing revenue so you can provide better services. But the mission isn't make more money.
So Chris, having worked at, 4 more associations and during that arc of that time period you've been working in Aptify, maybe talk about some commonalities across that and maybe even some differences of how things have changed over time and where you see the priorities of associations. I'd love to hear some of that.
One of the greatest advantages to having a developer and sort of releasing them from the closet and actually involving them is you end up having these people in your organization who actually sit at the backbone and just see how everything interconnects. And I wish more associations would focus on that. But what I've seen in like a real shift, and that is a lot of associations I've worked with, unfortunately, associations kind of get set in their ways. They're not the most change-oriented groups, as we all know. So the shift now, what I've seen through it is, unfortunately, a lot of people get stalled out. And I think COVID was a massive example of so many associations who realized their infrastructure, IT, sort of way of operating business was like, just like all many businesses was stagnated, and the whole digital transformation, that acceleration over the last like 5 years has just been like mind blowing. I'm seeing more trying to adopt best of breed solutions, which is great. I agree. Like you've got sort of two models. Do you customize it all and build it all yourself? Do you go best of breed solutions? There's time and place for all of it, and what meets your business needs. One of the downfalls I see, at least in my community, my group, is a lot of them still haven't brought the technical knowledge in house. Not necessarily customizing, building your own event management system, but actually having someone who can technically talk to the vendor and consultants and understands from more of that technical perspective on sort of how to do stuff, which at the end of the day has led to a lot of distributed systems. And now with the flourish of AI, everyone's like, but my data is all over the place. So how is AI now supposed to connect to all my data and be able to like do all these kind of cool, fancy summaries? And now, I'm also seeing the big movement of, okay, well, how do we get our data into a data warehouse and that sort of stuff? I remember before COVID, in at least the Aptify community, data-informed business intelligence and that was a hot keyword for a couple of years there, and then it kind of fanned out. I'm not entirely sure why. And then COVID hit, and 5 years later, now I'm starting to see a big resurgence of it, because if your data is nicely all connected, you can correctly be data informed and predictive analytics.
Right. It's interesting that we ended up already talking about this, the role of the technologist at the association, but I was wondering if both of you had thoughts about this. I have a very particular perspective on being a technologist. I'll just use a generalized term. But when you're getting into that, Chris, about how it's impactful to kind of let a technologist be a part of the association and have them contribute. One thing that we see a lot with associations is that resistance to change, reluctance to change, and that is actually reflected in the AMS market, frankly. And so I was wondering, what are your experiences with that in terms of being able to help through change as a technologist, as having the perspective on these different systems, how they're interconnected. And I'm guessing both of you have maybe been a part of that more than I have for a particular association.
Yeah, it's been wild. So like my first org, when I walked in right out of college, they had just gone live on Aptify like a month ago. And they went from a hosted Oracle system by the national organization to now not only self-hosting it all with Aptify, but 13 of the provincial associations had all come together and actually bought Aptify. We actually ran 13 associations out of the one Aptify instance. And it was all new to me, but migrating them and having them learn all this new stuff and working with them hand in hand, I got a bit of a jump on most developers who work in the background, just do their tech and all that. I literally day by day had to go sit down with the staff member and walk them through what we were developing or how it was supposed to be developed and all that. And that was a ton of fun and rewarding, but I don't think happens enough where you've actually got the blend of the business user and the developer.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Like, I think we don't see... I oftentimes recommend this, especially early on when we're talking to associations that are adopting Nimble AMS, for instance, is you should probably have someone on staff that's an expert on Salesforce platform technology. And that person is going to make your life using this AMS that much better. And they're going to give you that much more flexibility in what you're trying to do. Obviously, you can always work with somebody out there. There's plenty of consulting firms that have these experts, and they'll work directly with you and learn your mission. That's an option as well. But I think having someone that truly understands the ins and outs of that system just makes life so much easier. And those customers that do that, they typically have a much better experience.
Yeah, the analogy I've been using now for a few years, especially with Aptify, yes, it's an AMS, but at its root core, it's a development platform. And I can go on for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of features you have access to. But the analogy I've been using to people for a year is you went out, paid all this money, you bought this great big system, and you handed all your staff a Swiss Army knife. You showed them how to use a fork and a knife. You dropped them in the forest and said, I'll see you in a year. You came back in a year, and somehow they've survived, but they're still only using the fork and the knife. And I'm like, there's like 64 tools on this thing. And it's like, did you not pull one out? Like, there's a saw, there's a magnifying glass. And they're like, no, I was shown the fork and the knife. And it's not just your AMS. It's your marketing automation tools. It's your project management tools. I see a lot of associations go and buy these tools. They get the sales training or whatnot, but then they never like go, okay, you are the product owner on this. You need to like learn this, become the Swiss Army knife understander of this product, and then champion that out. I think that's one of probably the biggest downfalls. They just don't have that on-site knowledge or encourage a staff member to gain that knowledge.
Well, I think the where you guys are kind of going is how critical the ongoing adoption and investing in an ongoing adoption is. And I think what Chris, perhaps what you and Jake are saying is that you feel like an organization should invest in technical resources to help with that adoption, and it sounds like, Chris, you're suggesting that person should be inside the organization because they're just going to know the business better. And they'll play that role of the connective tissue in a sense between the software provider and the end user, and then that person who has the business knowledge and the technical knowledge can really help with that ongoing adoption. So I totally agree with all of that. Where I always am concerned with associations, if they take it one step further and they start actually building their own software, which I never think is a good idea for associations, because the minute you start building software, then you have to maintain it, support it, and that might be great as long as you can keep a guy like Chris around. But eventually, Chris, as he said, he worked at 4 different places, so he's going to leave at some point, and so it's always best to, I think, is for an association to acquire different software systems and then have someone like Chris or others who are actually helping with the connectivity between them, the adoption, all kinds of creative things that can be done with those softwares, but to try and stay away from actually building brand new systems, because if Chris leaves, then you've got a challenge of maintaining and taking care of that software. And that's where I've seen some organizations go and get themselves in trouble.
Yeah, and there's a cool finite sort of balance with that. And this is where I'm a little bit on the opposite spectrum from you, Rob, just a bit, because I have Aptify. It's a full development platform. Like, I can just spin up an API.
You can build anything.
Yeah, I can build. And I'm one of the few who actually just host it on my own local computer, and I build random stuff on it. I built my own entire project management, like a Monday.com clone, through Aptify just for fun one time, just to see if I could do it. But yeah, and there is a fine line. So with a platform like Aptify, because it is a development one, by having the developers in-house, one of the cool things is you can kind of throw off 10 hours, have your developer bring up more of a proof of concept, sort of a mock-up. There's a lot of times, even at AAPA, there's been some times I'm like, before we go buy the product where we don't 100% know exactly what we want, I can take like 10 hours and just throw it in Aptify.
Rough it out in Aptify.
Yeah, rough
nice
it out.
idea.
Let's try it and let's figure out some stuff
That.
first, so that when we go to actually, we have a clear definition on what our actual mandatory requirements are. And sometimes when I've done this before, and sometimes it's been like, okay, but we're still actually going to use that mock-up a little bit, because that's going to be the integration point from going live on that system. Well, we still need to integrate it down to Aptify so it integrates in with our person record, so then it makes it over to our data analytics system. So sometimes it actually saves a little bit of time.
Well, I think what you're doing there is still, in my mind, it works well, because you're still doing the work and committing to it inside of the Aptify platform. And, there's obviously other platforms out there. In the case of Nimble, the Salesforce platform. So what happens then is by being inside of that, if there are people who leave the organization, there's other trained people who can come in and kind of take over. But just kind of building things, with various different tools for each thing, I think is a bad idea.
Yeah, the true like, hey, developer, hit file new in a project and build us
Right.
this.
Yeah,
like,
that's
why reinvent the wheel when
Right.
it's kind of already been made?
And I think if there's close to off-the-shelf solutions that you can start with, like an Aptify for AMS or a Nimble with Salesforce, it's always better to be there for an association and then build all the other things on top of it. There's so many things that you don't have to worry about with that. You don't have to build security. You don't have to build report writing. You don't have to build, data integrity. You don't have to build an integration engine. Those things, you just come all with that solution, and then you can help with the business users really better define what they want and drive that adoption.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things, especially associations, small businesses, or like small groups of teams and all that, having a platform making those integrations becomes as easy as possible and as transparent as possible. One of sort of the issues I've noticed in the Aptify world is we tend to build our integrations and have them running in the background, but there's no real transparency into what it's fully doing. And then when the error occurs, it's like, give me 8 hours to try and go figure it out. So building those transparencies, because that's the crucial thing. If you do the best of breed model, what becomes critical for you is the integrations between those, which then all leads down to your data analytics platform. Right. So you can be business informed. And that is where, Rob, you're right. You buying the package thing that comes with those tools and trying to reinvent those. There's a lot of the developer stuff I follow in that. They're going to be like, hit file new, 8 hours, I'll have this up and running for you. But it's like, okay, but in 8 years from now, what's that code base going to look like? How has it been maintained? I've talked to a couple associations who had a brilliant developer build an amazing custom system and all that. Well, it's now time for SQL Server 2025. It's now time for Windows Server 2026. Exactly. And this person's been like, I've been here 15 years. I'm ready for what's next. And so unless you're willing to actually commit to becoming an IT development shop, and actually, it's just like you have an advocacy team. Even if you lose one, you got to put them out there. It's just the same thing. Unless you're going to go all in on a development team and manage that software and all the rapid application development and new versions every week of stuff that's happening these days. Unless you're willing to invest truly in that, Rob, you're right. Like hitting file new and creating fully custom stuff is like, unless you're building a custom product for your membership that you found a service that isn't done.
Yeah, that nobody else has.
Like no one's else done it. Like you found a product that would benefit your membership base, help them in their lives day to day, and that's then where, okay, there is no off the shelf solution. Now let's consider, do we build this product for them? Or do we shop around and find someone who would want to do it and we sponsor them?
Right. I mean, it comes back to the Swiss Army knife, right? Like, do you know all the tools in your toolbox, and can you use them to help you solve the problem? It comes back to there's this saying, there's this 80-20 rule that applies to a lot of things in life, but generally, like in software, a lot of people like to say 20% of the cost of software is building it the first time, and 80% of the cost is maintaining it over the next n number of years you want to run it. And that's usually lost, I would say, in particular on associations who try to build roll their own, right? And so I think that's touching on that a little bit. Is just that you don't find out about that until you get into the middle of it.
Yeah. Well, the other interesting out there is the actual. So one of the other parts to this is 10 years ago, there weren't a lot of platforms out there if you did want to roll your own. Like some of the service that like AppWrite is a great example of, well, here's the entire back-end system. Here's everything sort of as a service. And all you need to, like, the database is covered, caching is covered, all login, here's all your bits. You just need to use the bits to build your app. And it's like, oh, okay, hang on. So we don't have to worry about infrastructure. We don't have to worry about database version updates, all this and that. We have a development platform, and we just build the front end and design the schemas. And that one's one of those like sort of middle grounds now. These are newer ones out there where it's like, okay, we don't need to go like, we need 12 developers or 50 developers to maintain this thing. It's like, okay, we could actually have 2 developers, and our primary CRM we do ourselves, and then we integrate with best of breed sort of stuff too. So because there are some associations who do have very competent IT teams and all that. So there is also a place for them to play in the, okay, we're going to do this one thing custom because we've got unique things. Another thing with associations, they've all got, like, I can't create a common data table for associations. It's like impossible.
I feel you there.
Well, I ran into a colleague the other day, Thad Laurie, who is a client of ours at the American Geophysical Union. And they have a small but mighty technical team at their organization. And, like many organizations, they're dipping their toe into AI. And so they use that tool to do some really nifty things in terms of searching publications and then connecting people together who don't know each other, but they do similar types of research. So really, really creative thing. And of course, you're not going to find, as you said, Chris, you're not going to find a provider who has built that type of thing. But they've essentially done that. But now where Thad is smart is what he's trying to do is he's trying to find a company who will essentially take ownership of that concept that they've created, and they might partner in some type of way, maybe from an ownership perspective in that. But rather than trying to assume that he can build out a big development team and take that on for a long period of time, he's taken a different approach, which is to find a partner who will take on the maintenance and long-term investment in that, which I think is really smart.
Awesome.
The one other thing I wanted to say about trying to build an IT team at an association is that the other challenges, like if somebody comes to work for us, they are surrounded by many, many other technical resources, throughout the whole company. I mean, they love to work for a guy like Jake, and of course, Chris, if you worked here, it'd be the same thing. So there's enough people around that they can continue to learn from and continue to grow, and they don't have to leave if they don't want to. There's always more learning. But if you're in a small team of 2 or 3 developers, at some point in time, especially if you're a little lower in the chain, you're going to exhaust what you can learn from the people who are there. And it gets harder then to stay. And I think that's another thing that associations have to be cognizant of, is that they're just not really set up to be a learning engine from an IT perspective for these, unless they're really large association. I mean, if you got 1,000 staff and 75 in IT, that's a different environment. But those are the few and far between in this industry. So, Chris, if you've worked at 4 groups and worked with Aptify all this time, clearly there's some things that you like about Aptify. So I'd love to hear, what has kept you coming back, but then also talk about where you were going with that. Is how have you then been able to continue to grow your skills? Because maybe some of our listeners would be curious to know what your trick has been to be successful with that.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to reverse those. Because the reverse leads into why I continue with Aptify. So real early on in my career, I actually thought I was going to networking. I was going to be like IT security, like Cisco routers and all that. I did my CCNA through high school. Our high school actually offered all 4 sessions. I loved it. Routers, all the networking, everything. And then in college, I got introduced to web and HTML and JavaScript, and I fell in love. And our final project was, create a website. And back then, I was like just starting to really get into anime. So I built an anime web sort of themed off of specific anime, which then led me to go like, wouldn't it be cool if I had like an actual database of all the anime I watch and all that. And that led to, at that time, what I called Shinseki Cubed, which was, for the if any developers here, ASP.NET 2.0, completely hand-coded, every word manually typed out, every image manually cropped, and all that. And what ended up happening was I jumped in with CGA Manitoba, got introduced to Aptify, and was like, oh, well, there's now all of this development stuff. And that introduced me to VB.net. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then we were building the membership portal. And I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. So I went back and took that and applied it to my anime app, which now is on, I don't know, version 170, 200. It has been the app I have always said, every time a new technology comes out or anything I'm interested in or new techniques and all that, it's kind of my painted picture. I have the app. I know exactly what it's supposed to do. So I don't have to think about it. It's not a white canvas. I can just go, okay, how do I take this concept and implement it? So here's how crazy it was. It was a BlackBerry 10 WebWorks application. I was a BlackBerry fanboy. So it went that far. It was always private to me. It's now actually it's public. It's on a public page and all that. But what drove that is just my interest in continuing education and learning. I love web development and the technologies and all that. But then I found out with Aptify, because Aptify you self-host and that. So I figured out how to actually fully install an Aptify environment, which then brought it home, which meant I could do all sort of my fun playing around front-end web development stuff, but then have a full Aptify environment behind me that not only had, the admin staff app, that's the everyday app everyone uses to get into your data and all that. I didn't have to learn database, like high-level database administration, because I could just go create the entities and all that through the metadata system, and then they were just available to be used. It's got an entire workflow engine and event system. It's got a full-in messaging system, which is very, very easy to write your own integration with any mail client. I think I did a Real Magnet client in like 20 minutes to have it start sending out through Real Magnet. It just had all that stuff that was sort of way, like if I needed to go get the individual tools and do that, was still way over my head. And then it just, because it was a development platform, it just kept feeding my need to like learn more. How do I make it more performant? How do I code better? How do I make it more readable? And I just kept taking all the new stuff and just tacking it on top. And it was just all there with Aptify. The 80% of what I needed was just there, and I could just start trying stuff. And that even led into Docker containerization has become a big thing. And I got to go Microsoft Build in 2018 or 2017 or 2018, the last one before COVID. And it blew my mind. But everyone there was like, hey, SQL Server, which is what Aptify runs in a container. And I was like, oh, wait, hang on. So I don't need to install SQL Server on my computer anymore? So that kicked off another whole tangent of stuff. And so it just kept building. And I don't know, it's just had all the bits for me as being a developer, loving tech and all that, to just keep going. And it's allowed me to get like very deep into Aptify. I understand Aptify from more of its development platform level. So really when anyone says anything, I'm like, oh yeah, we can do that. We totally can do that in Aptify. We can do that in Aptify. 18 years now, and no one's brought a project or idea across my desk that I've said, no, you have to go find another software to do that. I had someone go over, like, can you recreate Higher Logic? And I went, well, yes, but no.
No, I'm not going to do that. So Jake, is what he's saying resonate with you in kind of the nimble Salesforce environment? Is that a similar story that like you could be telling?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one thing that so first of all, there's that natural curiosity that you have to have, especially on the technical side, to continue to learn and to care about what's actually happening. Because a lot of the time you can specialize or learn how to use the thing, but you maybe don't know how all the pieces are put together. Like the analogy I use for new developers is, okay, great, you have that IDE. Can you do it with a text editor and a command line? If you
Oh, it's
can't,
a nice
you
one. I'm
really
going to
don't
steal
know
that.
everything that's happening. Yeah, so you should like seek to know how to do it with the bare bones tools, and it gives you this level of understanding of what's actually happening that you actually have to go and find and put the pieces together, and that will teach you things that you never would have learned otherwise. There's a tendency, especially with junior devs and even mid-level devs, to go and just read the README and run the commands, copy paste the commands from the paper into the terminal, or run the software in the particular way. But do you really know what's going on, right? And I still, even today, like I still go back to, I'll do something and I'll be like, okay, that worked, but why?
Yeah.
And that process can just illuminate for you all different aspects of the software you're using and or building up upon that just make you that much more effective. And then yeah, when things come across your desk, it's like, hey, can we do this? It's like, yeah, I can imagine how we might be able to do that. Let's try it. Instead of, well, the README didn't tell me how to do that exact thing.
So taking it up a level from the technology, because obviously we've gone down a little deep there, and we probably have some listeners who aren't tech people. I'm curious, Chris, if what things from a technology strategy or mission oriented strategy perspective is AAPA focused on that you're trying to help them with?
We got a whole bunch of stuff going on right now. One of our big things right now is we are trying to bring a lot of stuff more in house. So over the last 5 years, there's been a slow increasing the IT department, bringing more technical in house. I was the big one for the Aptify AMS. We've recently brought in director of IT, who's an infrastructure genius, and bringing in all these understandings so that we can actually we want to up security and make sure that we are modernized and secure. We're delivering the best security we can. That's really hard when you're just relying on consultants, and having people now in-house who have gone through the minutiae to try and implement these things, and now having an expert on hand who can justify it all has been amazing. So we got tons of stuff in infrastructure we're working on to make us more streamlined, more secure, more modern. We are working at our our API architecture. We call it the DSP. It's kind of our middleware system that how we do all our integrations and our public website and interact with the Aptify database. It's stalled out. I think it's now 12-ish years old. So it's a Band-Aid on a Band-Aid now. It works. It's great. We can do anything with it and all that, but it's it's trapped in sort of 15-year-old methodologies. So we're looking at, what's the latest with the new Microsoft API technologies, because we're Microsoft fanboys over here. Sorry, Jake. We love our Microsoft, and Microsoft's doing some real cool new services and that. So we're trying to sort of structure ourselves so we can be lean and mean and rapidly prototype and rapidly get things out. When our website needs an endpoint to return some data from Aptify, it shouldn't take weeks. It should be an hour. The other big one is getting all of our systems data all into that central location so that we can better do predictive analytics and reporting. We've done a phenomenal job over the last 3-4 years getting there, and we've got a pretty good system. And it's working real well for us, but we've now got the in-house knowledge on building those reports and that. And it's okay, we're ready to take the next step and really get this stuff integrated together. And then we've even brought even just the IT help desk support is even more in-house now. And that we are a fully hybrid remote office. The office itself is in Virginia. I'm in Canada, Winnipeg, Manitoba. So we are primarily remote. And yeah, just that in the IT team, we're really working on just setting ourselves up so that 10 years from now, we're still humming and modern and going good, and trying to set ourselves up for success. And when the business needs something, it's like, we can absolutely help you with that.
Well, it warms my heart to hear that you're in Winnipeg, since that's where I was born. I guess we should have mentioned that
Winnipeg.
at the beginning. I think we were both sad the Jets went down a little early.
Yeah, that was a shame. And of course, they lost to Dallas. Sorry,
Yes.
Dallas fans. You beat Dominic Hasek way
Hockey
back
Texas,
when. And
I mean, come on.
No,
Well, this has been a real pleasure having you here, Chris.
that's been a ton of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great.
Yeah, at some point I was like, we should have planned the GIF of Ballmer, developers. There was a couple of times I was like, oh, that would have been like a perfect little pop-up.
Yeah, maybe Jay can dig that up and blend it in somehow.
Throw it in there. It's one of the greatest things. Say what you will about Steve Ballmer and his era of Microsoft and all that, but that is one of, like, I still go back to that and just being like, I want to get up there and high-five that dude when he did that.
He understood.
All right. Well, it's been a great conversation, Chris. Thanks for talking through why it's really important to think about having a technologist on staff, or at least partnering with technologists to help you meet your mission. And that's been another episode of the Beyond Membership podcast.